based on a true story. On the crest of Mount Riley, where peaks pierce the heavens like spears, three friends, Emily, Jacques, and Treves, trudged through the snowy silence. With each step, they delved deeper into the winter forest, leaving behind the only traces in the vast whiteness. They were the first to brave the winter here, in these dense woods, not far from civilization, but so far removed from it at the same time. Beneath the overhanging branches of snow-laden trees, Emily, Jacques, and Treves set up camp. The campfire crackled, casting shadows on the pristine screen of snow around them. They laughed, sharing plans for the days ahead, but as night fell over the ridge, the silence became so deafening that it felt almost menacing. Soon after they settled into their sleeping bags, peculiarities began to unfold. At first, it seemed the wind was playing with the snow, but it soon became clear. The sounds were unlike the usual nocturnal forest noises. They were low and rhythmic, like whispers born of the night itself, and the light flickering among the trees was unlike the glow of the campfire. It was cold and bluish, as if the icy breath of an unseen beast. Jacques, always the boldest among them, resolved to unravel this mystery. He stood up, took a flashlight, and headed toward the source of the sounds and lights. Emily and Treves didn't stop him. Curiosity outweighed fear. They watched him until his figure dissolved into the darkness. Time passed, but Jacques never returned. Alarm crept into their hearts, and they decided it best to stay in the tent and hope for answers come morning. Dawn greeted them with freezing air and a gray light barely piercing through the clouds. Jacques was gone, his sleeping bag neatly folded, and in its place only an indentation in the snow remained. Emily and Treves called out to him, but there was only silence in return. There were no signs of struggle around the camp. All their belongings remained untouched except for Jacques' compass lying on the ground near their tent. This small instrument that always pointed Jacques north now seemed a plaything of unknown forces, its needle whirling in an endless dance, unable to find north. Clutching each other's shoulders, Emily and Treves, armed with sinking hope and mounting horror, took their first steps into the unknown, towards the traces that could lead them to Jacques, or to something they couldn't imagine. With each step Emily and Treves took across the anxiety-filled snowy field, their confidence melted like the last rays of a setting sun. The snow swirled around them, and the wind seemed to mock their futile attempts to find Jacques. Their cries, filled with despair, echoed through the cold air, but all that returned was a sinister echo. Suddenly, they caught sight of a sinister cave, lost and forgotten by time, its entrance guarded by runes covered in frost. The runes seemed like a warning from forgotten times, a plea not to enter the darkness guarding its secrets. Inside the cave, an impenetrable darkness reigned, devouring the light from their torches like a monstrous entity, swallowing flickers of hope. As they ventured deeper, they saw Jacques' camera on the rocky floor, its last photos a chaos of shadows and flickering silhouettes. The air in the cave was chilling, and every breath became an icy sculpture, born and dying in a single moment. Treves and Emily halted, feeling the presence of something unseen. And then, from the darkest corner, a pair of glowing, lifeless eyes stared at them. The creature that slowly emerged from the shadows was unimaginably massive. Its size and shape were so absurd that the brain struggled to comprehend them. It moved with such majesty that the air around it seemed to tremble. Treves, in a final attempt to grasp reality, lifted his camera, but when the flash exploded into the darkness, the cave walls came alive with terrifying images. The depictions revealed that before them stood a creature that was once human, but had become something far more horrifying, a predator of ancient times, having lost its soul and become the guardian of frozen ridges and abandoned secrets. Realizing they were face to face with an unknown horror, Emily and Treves tried to slowly retreat towards the cave's exit, maintaining vigilance. But the creature, as if sensing their fear, began to approach slowly, its steps heavy and assured. Each movement echoed through the narrow cave corridors, creating the illusion that there were many such entities. Treves, attempting to protect Emily, grabbed a piece of broken rock and hurled it at the dark embodiment of nightmare. But the stone passed through the creature as if it were made of mist, striking the wall with a loud thud. In response, the creature emitted a prolonged, agonizing howl that froze the blood in their veins. Emily, clinging to her last shreds of courage, seized a torch and threw it toward the creature. But the flame only flickered briefly on its surface and died out. The creature's eyes glowed with sinister light, and it moved forward faster, emitting steam from its inhuman mouth that in the frigid cave air looked like smoke from the fires of hell. Treves shouted for Emily to run while he kept the creature at bay, using his jacket as a primitive shield. He knew his chances were slim, but he could buy Emily a few precious seconds. With her name on his lips, he distracted the creature, while Emily, tearful and terrified, clutching Jacques' camera as evidence of the supernatural, headed towards the cave's exit. As she cast a final glance backward, she saw Treves knocked down and consumed by the darkness that engulfed his cries. Struggling to find her way out through the blinding white veil of snow, Emily realized she was now alone and unlikely to survive in this icy wasteland that had become a tomb for her friends. The snow continued to fall incessantly, concealing all traces of the tragedy beneath it. The world around the cave once again descended into white silence, as if nothing had ever happened. Days passed, and Mount Riley felt the footfall of humanity once more. A new group of tourists seeking adventure in the frozen wilderness stumbled upon the secluded spot disturbed by recent visitors. Among the disarray of the abandoned camp, they discovered a camera covered in snow and ice. The tapes preserved the final moments of Emily, Treves, and Jacques. Their laughter, excitement, strange glowing lights, the snowstorm, their frightened faces, and the silhouettes of those hunting them in the darkness. The footage was fragmented and confusing, but the fear in the tourists' eyes was evident and genuine. The new tourists left Mount Riley carrying the camera and the heavy burden of unknowing. They told their story, but no one believed. Only whispers of the forgotten ridge and its secrets continued to live on, passed from mouth to mouth, warning all who dared enter these snowbound wildernesses.